At the end of the day, very serious allegations made against the team, the people, and when I hear that Mercedes have taken the pain of making 40 redundancies, that's 50% of, less than 50% of the redundancies and the pain that we've been through at Red Bull Racing.
So it finally happened. Red Bull has been found guilty of breaching the budget cap. And rest assured that Hamilton had a lot to say about this crime of Red Bull. The team that stripped his 8th record-breaking championship at the last race, at the very last lap, has reportedly done that in an illegal way. So what is Hamilton's verdict on this whole situation with Red Bull? Is there a way that he'll receive the 8th championship in the same controversial manner that it was stripped away from him? Well, this video has the answers to these questions and many more, so stick around with us until the end. Now, the budget cap has been one of the most controversial topics on the grid, even prior to it being reached by Red Bull. Many teams have been vocal about it, saying that in 2022, it's impossible to stay within the limits due to the increased inflation and the increased cost of literally everything it takes to race in F1. However, the reports that have been finalized for the 2021 season show that Red Bull were indeed found guilty of breaching the cap for the previous season, one that Verstappen won in a very controversial manner in the last race of the season. Now, as that wasn't enough by itself, Hamilton now has to accept the fact that his main rival spent more money than the original limit in order to strip the 8th championship away from him. Lewis Hamilton spoke about this manner multiple times, saying that even a small breach of $300,000 would have made Mercedes much more competitive last year, because then they would have been able to bring a new revised wing or new floor that would have boosted its performance. I remember last year in Silverstone we had our last upgrade, and fortunately it was great and we could fight with it, but then we would see Red Bull every weekend or every other weekend bring in upgrades. They had, I think, at least 4 more upgrades from that point. If we spent $300,000 on a new floor or an adapted wing, it would have changed the outcome of the championship, naturally, because we would have been in better competition in the next race you had it on. So I hope that's not the case for the sport, said Hamilton. Now, prior to the Suzuka GP, Hamilton was asked about whether teams should be penalised severely or not for being found guilty of breaching the budget cap, adding, "I think it's imperative, honestly, just for transparency. I think it would be bad for the sport if action wasn't taken if there was a breach, but I don't know if there is, so I'll just wait as you will." So all of this was said prior to the breach being officially confirmed, and rest assured that Hamilton and Wolff won't just sit in the back and wait for the FIA to do the right thing on its own. Quite the contrary, Wolff has been adamant that the FIA needs to punish the Austrian team as severely as possible, because that way they'll make an example from them and other teams will know what happens when you try to play with the rules. If you're spending $5 million more and you're still in the minor breach, it still has a big impact on the championship. To give you an idea, we obviously monitor closely which parts are being brought to the track from the top teams every single race, 2021 season and 2022 season. We can see that there are 2 top teams that are just about the same, and there is another team that spends more. So we know exactly that we're spending $3.5 million a year in parts that we bring to the car, and then you can see what difference it makes to spend another $500,000. It would be a difference. We haven't produced lightweight parts for the car in order to bring us down from a double-digit overweight because we simply haven't got the money. So we need to do it for next year's car. We can't homologate a lightweight chassis and bring it in because it's just $2 million that we will be over the cap. So you can see every spend more has a performance advantage, finished Wolff. Ferrari are also supportive of Mercedes in this case, especially after Binotto called for more transparency in the 2022 spendings of Red Bull. He doesn't really understand where Red Bull finds all that money for constant upgrades, something that the Maranello team hasn't been able to implement in their own car due to the budget cap limitations. Martin Brundle, who is an ex-F1 driver and an analyst in Sky Sports F1, said that the FIA needs to bring the harshest penalty to Red Bull in order to save the integrity of the sport. When asked about whether the breach itself has broken the integrity of F1, Brundle said, "Not really, no, as long as the budget cap is controlled and as long as the penalties are crystal clear and hard enough. I think it's fundamentally a good system and it's in its early stages. We have to remember that. It's just the detail now, and it's got to be made clear that you stick to the cost cap or just under it, otherwise it's going to hurt. What seems crazy to me is that a minor breach can be up to 5% overspend on the cost cap. That's around $7 million. We know that's a massive upgrade on a car, maybe even a B-spec for some teams. It needs tightening up because the other teams will be under pressure. The team boss will be saying, "Why didn't you do this? Why don't you overspend a bit and pay a fine or get a slap on the wrist and go a tenth or two faster?" Finished Brundle. But quickly before we move on, we've partnered with the official F1 store to bring the best Formula 1 merch and accessories out there. So check out the first link down below and you might even get yourself a juicy discount. So these are very interesting reports coming from Mercedes regarding the potential breach of the budget cap, and it seems like Wolff is ready to risk it all and go well over the budget cap for the 2023 season if that means his team will pay a fine at the end of the season. According to the FIA's rulebook, a minor breach means that the team will likely get a public reprimand, reduce wind tunnel time, or pay 5 times the amount of breach they've caused in the previous season as a fine. If this is the case, then Wolff thinks that it would be only fair of his team to push the budget cap, make the breach, and then pay a fine at the end of the season because his drivers will be able to get back on top of their game.
Mill is going since a while that they are over, and they are quite a lot over. That's not from some employees, but they've been investigated now for months.
Red Bull are still unwilling to accept the fact that they've committed a breach, and according to Helmut Marko, there's not a single chance that Verstappen will see the maiden championship being stripped away from him. He believes that the team hasn't committed any kind of breach and that talks with the FIA should continue in order to see how they interpreted some of the spendings. Now, according to reports, Red Bull have been found guilty of overspending money in 2 categories, which are sick pay and catering services. On top of that, there's been a tweet from Sergio Perez dining with the team's sponsor members' Cash App and paying the lucrative bill at the end of the dinner. So what's next for Red Bull? They could also see a further deduction in the budget cap for the 2023 season, which is something that will definitely hurt their championship aspirations, given the fact that the budget cap for the 2023 season is projected at $135 million. Nevertheless, what Mercedes is asking is kind of unfair, because the FIA has brought the rules of minor breach punishments prior to any team committing a breach. True, the championship ended the way it did. That's got nothing to do with how the penalties will be applied to the teams that committed a breach. Basically, they want to change the penalties now because they've lost the championship in the last lap at the last race, not choosing to change the tyres on Hamilton, and are now pushing for something that really makes no sense. On the other hand, you could understand their frustration, and if Red Bull's penalty is truly an insignificant one, all of the teams on the grid will be motivated to breach the budget cap and then face these small repercussions at the end of the season. With that being said, the FIA has a very hard decision ahead of itself, and one needs to think about whether they'll make an example out of Red Bull's case or not. So, what do you think about Hamilton and Wolff's verdict on the Red Bull potential breach? Let us know in the comments below.